Hey everybody, I'm Daniel Loa, editor of HeadyNJ.com, and I want to present something new to you. It's going to be the Heady Chronicle. I'm going to be doing the show here more. We're going to have some more podcasts. For example, giving people the sort of information that they want, on New Jersey cannabis news, politics, business, culture, and, beyond Jersey, like in some cases. A lot of these things, affect our friends, like in New York and Pennsylvania, especially, for example, along with Connecticut, the other state legal cannabis markets, are really interesting too, and a lot of it's like the same issues that we've been seeing there. But yeah, really interested in trying to make like a podcast here, new TV show for starring me, Daniel Loa. Usually I just do a lot of like the writing, the editing that you see on our site, headynj.com. So this is like a really new format for me. So trying to see like what we can do. We're going to be providing you, for example, some of our best stuff that's been on YouTube. We're going to be making clips of some audio, putting some videos up here. So there's a lot that we've been doing, as we've been covering, New Jersey cannabis legalization, for like a good while now. My partner started it in 2018, and I've been running with it. And now I'm the editor publisher here. So I've been really like working to expand this, cover like the news. It's like the market's been becoming a thing. We got dispensaries for people to go to. We have some more flour for people to try. Excuse me, but we still got a lot of interesting issues here. So we're still waiting on lounges. I think we could probably use some like officially legal cannabis drinks. So a lot's happening, in our market, in our country. Obviously we had the election recently, and a lot of progressives that wanted Kamala Harris to win, are unhappy. Donald Trump himself, says he likes cannabis. We'll see what happens. We at Hetty and J did not endorse a candidate. We are for descheduling and home grow legalization here in New Jersey. That's been like another really big issue that we've been covering, for example, that we really haven't made much progress on. But we have made progress. That isn't to say, like we do have like some great like state senators supporting us. For example, we have some bipartisan support with Anthony Bucco supporting as a Republican from Morris County. We got Vingo Paul of Monmouth, Troy Singleton of Burlington. Supporting, leading the fight. So we are making progress there, bit by bit. Please contact your state senators, your assembly people for that effort. That's been like one of the big things like we've been covering that we have been fighting for. So there's definitely going to be like some home grow content here for the people that like that. Describing the issues a little more in depth. Right now just doing like a little rundown of what the show's going to be like, what this is going to be like. It's going to be a little eclectic like me. So we're going to have like a few things here and there. We'll have some more clips. I do want to plan to interview people and maybe record a video, Zoom, Google Meet that way. So that should be interesting. We're gonna be trying to make more videos that way. People want to see my pretty face, good smile, for example. That's an interesting thing. Putting this on YouTube and Spotify, or should I not even say the names of the companies? So should be fun. Trying to cover this thing. As we get more and more news, and it's an interesting time. As we have like more than 100 dispensaries here in Jersey, like 180 plus or so. Like more than like 100 dispensaries have opened in like the last 14 months, and it has been insane, man. As I've been trying to like grow this company, figure out business, cover the industry, hustle. So, we've been making progress, and it's been like really interesting. For example, covering these things. So I think well, like one fun thing is you might want to like a rundown of some like the news that we've been covering this week. So like yesterday, for example, or it was the day before rather, like Steve Sweeney, who was the former NJ Senate president, came to the Hudson County Chamber of Commerce to speak because he's run for governor next year. So the governor in New Jersey is like really powerful and has like a lot of power to do things. So like Sweeney was in power like during like Christie's era, especially, and then lost in 2021. So he's an interesting guy. He's generally pro cannabis. He likes the business side of it, for example. So he's an interesting guy because he was always more of like a moderate from South Jersey versus some of the more North Jersey and Central Jersey leaders were more progressive. So that was always like an interesting thing and dynamic that came out in that conversation. So that was we'll see what happens. There's a few other candidates running for governor, like Jersey City Mayor Steve Fulop. We've been covering. He's been really pushing, for example, like to have like a lot of dispensaries like in the city, like more than 20 is kind of like insane. On some level, it's really difficult because like everybody wants to open their store, and we want to support like everybody, for example, like in their efforts. So like it's really intense, when some of these uh, companies have been really having some intense issues trying to open. They come to Jersey City. It's like, oh wow. So you go from like in Jersey, we sort of have like deserts and clusters now. You go from like town after town, no dispensary. Jersey City, 20 plus dispensaries. Like planning like 60 there might be like 60 dispensaries, which is sort of difficult. The thing about cannabis is like the money isn't as good right now than you think because we have federal prohibition for like a lot of these companies. Because like federal prohibition means that they can't deduct their expenses because of Section 280E of the IRS tax code. So like a lot of businesses will talk about that, so they'll seem flush, but then like if they can't deduct it and they have all these expenses, it becomes a lot more difficult that way. And then it's really hard to get it into. It is so hard to open a dispensary. It is so hard to get a product to market. For example, like we've really been, at Heady and J championing the local guys, the smaller guys, minorities, women, people of color. I myself, Peruvian American. You see that shield in the back is Peruvian, the copper shield. So that's where my family's from. So I've really been supporting Hispanics in this and trying to get like to see, Hispanic community like prosperous. Whether the African American community, Asian community, ideally everybody can make money off this. So but it's difficult, Now we have the issue of justice. It's like really reared its head because now we want to have like a tax on cannabis products to get money to fund social justice programs to help people hurt by the war on drugs. But New Jersey cannabis, unfortunately, has been like really expensive like over the years, and it's still like really expensive compared to the underground legacy market, which is difficult. We're trying to support a legal industry. We're all trying to go legit, trying to deal with these issues, and it's really hard. For example, like when these companies have to charge like a lot of money, sometimes it's really difficult because now we have like the one set of issues. First, this market was created under Chris Christie, the marijuana market for medical purposes, under our former Republican governor. He did not set up a good market, did not have patience. There weren't many companies. There wasn't much money to be made. The product was terrible, and it was sort of awful. And he really favored like the large MSOs, these like multi-state operators. They really run and have like some of like the worst practices of like corporate America that we're seeing, where like they don't really they're like like the product's terrible and they don't treat their workers well. So like it's an interesting combination quite often. So, that's been like a really interesting thing that's going on here in Jersey where we like have been like fighting and trying to like get like a bigger market, like slowly but surely. Like we had all the dispensaries come on and that was great, but then we needed more cultivators. So we're slowly getting more cultivators bit by bit. And then it's interesting, we had some large MSOs, now we have some small MSOs with only in a few states. Some are only in one state, so then it's interesting to see like who's succeeding in this market. So that's been like a really interesting issue. So there's the idea of like the thief tax increase. Like Sweeney's not against, and we'll be following at the next CRC meeting. For example, also, yesterday, also this week, for example, we had Wu Tang Clan's Raekwon and Charlamagne the God opened Hashtoria in Newark. It's an interesting name, Hashtoria. I don't think I actually put this in the article how it's a combination of hash, it's a form of cannabis concentrate, and Astoria place in Queens, in Oregon, where they had their first company. So it's really interesting because Raekwon's from um, Staten Island, and he was telling me about how he used to come to Newark and party, and so it's really interesting. And Charlamagne the God's like got like a really powerful podcast. The Breakfast Club has been really out there, covering stuff. It's been really interesting. So, yeah, that'll be something else we'll be following. What's happening with Astoria. We have some more like legacy legal companies. People have been on the underground, like NJ Greenstein, want to go legit. So they held a comedy show that was pretty interesting. I went to recently, so that was pretty cool. So that's the type of some of the content that we'll be covering. For example, combination of like politics, business, culture, and fun. We're covering like CRC announcements. Like last Friday, they announced they're trying to go after this intoxicating hemp uh, issue. So they don't like the sale of like shady snake oil, artificial intoxicating hemp. So that's some intoxicating hemp products are like Delta 8 THC, Delta 10 THC, and especially THCA is a big one. So the 2018 Farm Bill was passed by Congress with Republican, Democratic bipartisan support, signed into law by former and President-elect Donald Trump. And they didn't really understand like hemp and like what they were legalizing. Like the difference between like cannabis and hemp is like a funny idea to see like what's the real difference. Like they basically say like hemp or like cannabis. It's like this thing with less than zero point 0.3 delta 9 THC is hemp. So that's supposed to be the hemp that doesn't get you high. But they didn't really know about any of the other cannabinoids that I mentioned or like some of the other ones that have come out, like CBD, CBN. So there's so many of these like cannabinoids. Like so CBD like doesn't get you high, and like a lot of like hemp can be used to make rope, for example, most famously used like back in the day. So that was like a really interesting thing. Versus like now people have really been getting high off this intoxicating hemp. Like it's in the smoke shops. And a lot of it's bad. A lot of it is bad stuff. Like they say it has like 1,000 milligrams when it really doesn't. Like it's not really made that well. Like the vape pens are really like the worst. But like some of the gummies are okay. Like some of it's okay. And then it's really hard. So then you have to really figure out like is this like a shady guy like selling me a product that's like probably bad, or is this like a good nice good guy who cares selling me a product with like details like the COA is the certificate of analysis that they have that will like explain like what's in the product is really interesting. But then like that can be like really hard to read, and then you have to get like a QR code. You have to go to the QR code. You have to click on it. So like a lot of people don't do that. So that's been like a really controversial thing because it's kind of like this weird loophole, and like it's sort of like a national market versus like that like Congress sort of like okayed one way or another, where like this legal cannabis is what like we really wanted, and it's like really favored by like a lot of like the people that are Heady fans. A lot of like the underground legacy consumers, like they have concerns about intoxicating hemp. A lot of the legal like independent craft cannabis guys like have concerns about intoxicating hemp, and there's a lot of big issues that way in the market. We've been covering, and it's been kind of crazy that the state kind of try to do away with that and like kill like all of these smoke shops from selling like hemp that got you high. It was like a really big issue, and then the courts were like, "No, sorry, state, you can't do that. This is sort of federally legal." So that's been really weird. But then they're like, you can enforce like certain things. So like now we got this from the CRC. Problem is the CRC has been sort of like under the gun and like understaffed and underfinanced like for 3 years since it started spring 2021. It's been a big issue trying to get this up. You basically have to like build an agency to like regulate this market and deal with like set up red tape and like set up like a program that's not as much red tape as there used to be. So it's been like really hard, and like people are putting like a lot of money into it. Like this is a media company. We're running this on a shoestring. You need a good like $500,000, $3 million, open a dispensary, grow. You might need even more money, millions of dollars. Like it's sort of like insane for like a guy who's been like the hot dog stand, Etsy store type business. Like a hustler doing it themselves. Maybe they hire a couple people. Maybe they're working with like a friend. Versus like you really need like a scaled enterprise to open this dispensary, and it sucks because then like that's what people want to see. They want to see craft cannabis in the market. They want to see home grow, and the CRC can't do anything about home grow. That's another big issue people keep noting. That we want to make clear that you got to lobby your legislators in the legislature about that. So yeah, a lot of big things have been coming up. There was a cannabis culture film festival last week. That was really interesting. In Camden, they showed some interesting movies. I could only go to one day; it was a 2-day thing. So they seemed to be having like a lot of fun with some of the things they were doing. We just had a puff and pitch last night. That was a cannabis industry event. We were working with Dad Riga is a good guy. He's gonna be a manufacturer in the market hopefully sooner than later. And yeah, like there's been like so many dispensaries. We've been trying to cover them, and go back to some of the ones that have already been open that we didn't cover in the first place. With NJ Leaf and Conservatory Cannabis recently. And it's been a really interesting thing, and like a lot of the things we've been seeing. Like this year, there's been so many award ceremonies, and there's like another one coming too. So we had the dispensary guy, Mike Wheel, had a ceremony in spring that was really interesting, where people were just voting. And then we had like the first legal cannabis cup in September, where like you could see like what company made what. Uh, so that was really interesting to see too. So we've seen like a lot of like the independents that we've liked, and some of like the craft cannabis companies have been doing like really well in that. And that's been like really interesting to see, for example. And then like this a couple weeks ago, we had this tri-state cultivators harvest cup uh for the best flower. So that was only for flower. And that was like an interesting thing because like we had the legal cannabis cup was only like licensed companies. The dispensary awards was dispensaries and cultivators awarded. This was just for flower, and it was like a blind thing where you didn't know the name of the strain and you didn't know who made it. So that was really interesting when like legacy and home growers could compete against essentially like licensed companies. So that was like really interesting to see, and that's some of the stuff. We're gonna be bringing you for example, like some of that content, content like that, like in the future. So a lot of like interesting things are going on here in Jersey, across the country. It's difficult, it's kind of a weird time in America on like a lot of levels with like the national election. A lot of people wanted Harris to win. She did not win. Now we got Trump, who doesn't like a lot of the criminal justice things, but part of like cannabis legalization, probably. But he does like business and he does like vice, which is what a lot of people see this as versus like a medicine. So then it's like a really big issue of like how is this going to get legalized? Is it going to get like rescheduled to Schedule 3? That was kind of like the policy that Joe Biden's like administration or like was slowly going towards. The DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, which is like literally like the fucking feds. Them and like the FBI are usually what people mean when they say like the feds as cops. So like the DEA has like way too much power in this process to like hold like a hearing. There's supposed to be a hearing December 2nd. It's been moved to next year. Like they get to pick like who they're gonna have at the hearing. Like it's not a good process, and like you probably need Congress to change the process. Biden started the process in 2022 during the midterms. Like it's been going slow. We haven't seen much from it. Like he pardoned some people that were like that had federal charges of possession. Excuse me. That's not many people though. But like Chris Goldstein, who's a great like legalization advocate from South Jersey, occasional guest writer for Heady and Che, for example, too, it was really like pushing that. He had a pardon himself. So that was like really interesting to see the nature of that. Like he went to the White House and was like lobbying Harris, and she seemed like she was for descheduling, but like now it seems like she kind of wasn't. Like the thing about her was she always got famous, made her bones on being like the tough on crime DA. But then it's like you're the San Francisco DA, you're a black woman. So she was always trying to play like both sides. And then it's like she wasn't on Joe Rogan's podcast. and that might have cost her the election. So that's really interesting. The nature of like how like podcasts become like really big. Like Charlemagne the God talked to her on his podcast. You know, Joe Rogan talked to Trump on his podcast and came out in favor of Trump. Joe Rogan's like a really interesting guy because he's sort of like a weird guy, especially like in 2024, where like he definitely like loves like weed and like shrooms and has had like a lot of people talk about those things. But like he's definitely like more, I guess, like been more conservative. Like he said on his show, he was more of like a '90s liberal. Like he's not like he's like he gets like an economically liberal argument that hasn't been like prominently been made by Harris or Democrats about like how we need things like 15 an hour, workforce protections, like the nature of corporations. And but like Rogan believes like in a conversation, and like he didn't have that conversation. He was big on questioning like the COVID stuff, and like that was a big issue for people a couple of years ago. But like that's not our thing, so we don't really talk about that. So like I'm not gonna bring up things like COVID. You know, I'm not gonna bring up things like stuff like that. That's not really like about cannabis. This is a cannabis and plant medicine show. I do enjoy psilocybin, magic mushrooms, shrooms. They are helpful. It is something we're following for legalization here in Jersey. It is a big issue. It can help you with trauma. It really does depend on the quality and the dosage, especially, and the setting, the mindset, and where you are. So, like, those are really interesting issues that, like, the New Jersey legislature has made progress towards, like, medical psilocybin, medical shrooms legalization. Is really interesting, and it's really interesting to see like people deal with that because you can really heal trauma and like give the PTSD of like soldiers and 9/11 first responders and like the very sickly people. And you know, I'm myself may or may not have done it, so like that's been like a really interesting thing to cover. So yeah, you know, like we have Trump coming in, like he seems like he might be pro cannabis, but like pro MSO cannabis with like the way Christie was. But like we don't know yet. Like Matt Gates is gonna be like Attorney General. Like he had some issues, and now he's gonna be the Attorney General or nominated. So like that'll be interesting to see like what happens there. Like see more of the pro MSO thing. But like a lot of the MSOs and a lot of like the big cannabis, like what they say about that, like they like descheduling too, and I think it does really help them too. Like Schedule 3 doesn't really solve a lot of the issues that like we've been facing. Like Heady and J is a media company, and we're constantly dinged by big tech and like the anti-marijuana algorithms is like a really big issue. For example, for us on Instagram, where like most of our audience is, it's like a really interesting thing. For example, so Spotify and you know like YouTube a little cooler with that. So like we really appreciate them running with this. And yeah, well, hopefully we'll be on Apple too. We're working on that. So, you know, we want to get to people where they are in this ever evolving media landscape of 2024. It's been really interesting. And it's been interesting following that type of stuff, you know, as we've been going on, building Eddie and Jay over these last few years. For example, you know, there's been a lot going on. And we just expect more to happen. So, we'll see what happens. You know, Trump himself, like his first attorney general, like Jeff Sessions, was completely against it and like nearly ruined everything. But then, like that guy was only in there a year, and then like Trump signed the farm bill, and he freed a few, like pardoned a few people. That was always like the problem with like Joe Biden, like as like the other guy to be like all for him, and like as like a big Democrat and a cannabis person, because he was a leader on the war on drugs. He was for the war on drugs in the 80s. He was a big senator then, powerful senator in the 1980s. You know, he is that old. And like he was for like a lot of this tough on crime stuff, like locking people up for joint stuff, and like that was really bad. And like he saw the writing on the wall like a little, but like there were other candidates who were running against him in 2020, like Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, others, Cory Booker, you know, from Jersey, who were all like more pro cannabis. But like he had the name and then and won. So big issues on like the national front versus here in Jersey. Well, here in Jersey, it wasn't even the sort of election that people thought. That like a lot of people have been like pissed at like inflation, and I understand it. I'm pissed at inflation too. It's really hard, foreign affairs, and it's really hard, the nature of like a lot of this stuff. For example, like issues with immigration that once again not cannabis, but like stuff is going on that's really intense. We're just trying to like push like our message here of descheduling, the nature of justice. So we'll see what happens with that. We want to entertain you. We want to inform you. So I hope you enjoy like our upcoming episodes. They're gonna be a little varied. Sometimes I'll have a guest, for example. Sometimes it might just be a throwback. So hope you like it anyway. Have a good weekend. Take care.